This is Bob Bakert with Jazz Guitar Today. We're here with Sean McGowan. And so go ahead, Sean. Grab that guitar. What were you talking
Oh,
about?
yes. Okay, yeah. Nice to see you, Bob. We immediately started guitars. So this is a really cool Archtop that I'm temporarily borrowing from the Rocky Mountain Archtop show, the festival, and this is made by Tyler Wells of LHT Guitars in California, and
Wow.
it's a beautiful, really cool Archtop. You can see there's like acoustic, holes in here, which is really nice to play unplugged. It's very comfortable, super thin and ergonomic, and this back is actually the back and sides are a piece of myrtle that he harvested near his property in California. So, as you
Myrtle?
know,
Myrtle? Check this
Myrtlewood.
out. Myrtle.
Oh, cool!
Myrtle.
Isn't that beautiful?
Yep, it
I
is.
love Myrtlewood.
And it's got such
Yeah.
a
So,
it's got such a nice dry sound to it. It just I love it.
yeah, no, I was just gonna say, it was so nice to see you at the Archtop Festival last month, and that is truly the candy store for all of us. I mean, it's just unbelievable, one booth to the next, just seeing the most amazing guitars being built today.
I'll tell you what, it's funny you bring that up because anybody who digs guitar that doesn't go out there is nuts. That, that is, I gotta tell you, it's the coolest thing. I mean, from the vibe of the people, to who's there just hanging around. I
Yeah.
mean, the players are just there hanging around, and players you never heard of, they go, "Oh my God, who's that guy?" And
Right, right.
and the guitars that are there. I mean, I had hands. I played a guitar made by Jimmy D'Acquisto. I mean, everybody. I mean, all the great players. I played that Super 400 from the Blue Guitar Collection, the
Yeah.
Gibson Super 400, which is probably the best Gibson guitar I've ever had my hands on. But I mean, Jimmy stuff was. I mean, every major guy was represented in some fashion that I can think of, and then like Benedetto obviously was there, and I mean, it was just really cool, and all the playing that was going on, and all the different venues that are happening, and you know, we got to hand it to Peter Hendrickson, who just knocked it out of the park in
Yeah.
every way.
Yeah,
And
Peter's done an extraordinary job putting this together. And one of the many things that I really love and admire about Pete is his attention to the musicianship part of it. He really is pro musician, from his amps and the amp designs of, the Hendrickson, well, what started out as the jazz amps and now the Hendrickson Bud amps in various iterations. But in curating the festival, he really wants it to be all about the luthiers, obviously, but also all about the players. And so
yeah,
everything set up with music at the forefront, with venues and workshops, and education is a big part of it. So it's just such a great festival for all of those different things that Peter puts a lot of care and attention into.
the guidance and direction of that festival is it's just wonderful. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
wonderful. I mean,
So,
it's pure. The intention is pure, and it's you really that people that are there that love the Archtop guitar.
so agreed. And I just want to put in a quick plug. We're on for next year. It's going to be the same weekend in September.
Right?
And Frank Vignola's already signed up to do his Mile High Camp the week leading up to that weekend, which was an extra bonus. And I had the good fortune of teaching there this past summer, along with Frank and Jimmy Bruno and Bruce Foreman and Ken Smith and Gary Mazzaropi, the great bassist from New York, came out. And it was so much fun. But that whole week leading up to the weekend was just, it's basically kind of like a dream week for most jazz and archtop guitar enthusiasts. So next year, Peter is expanding it to include a blues stage and a Western swing stage. So it's going to be really cool.
Yeah, I talked to Peter yesterday, as a matter of fact, about all that, and I his energy and enthusiasm is unbridled and unbounded. I mean, the guy he's just got to go. I'm a big fan of Peter, as you are as well, and that's it. So anyway, to kind of put a cap on the plug, get your ass out there. If you haven't been there, get your ass out there next year. This year was September 9th through 11th. You will have a ball. And the little town of Arvada, Colorado, the downtown old section, if you will, is so much fun. I mean, and there's an ice cream shop there. I never eat ice cream, but I did eat ice cream out there.
It's good ice cream.
And
Yeah, it's easy to get there by train too. I like to point that out because you can just fly into Denver and take the train the whole way. You don't
right.
even have to with the car or Denver
Plenty of
traffic.
hotel rooms, a lot of space, great food, easy to get around. It's a festival that's large enough to be really, really engaging, small enough that you don't feel overwhelmed. And
Right.
it just can't get any better. So let's talk about you, Mr. Let me get this. Let me make sure I say that the Doctor of Musical Arts degree happens to be one of the things that you hold, my friend.
Yes, I have a degree in guitar, isn't that amazing? Sometimes I'll tell people that and they'll say, what, you can do that? You can get a degree, a doctorate in guitar? But yeah, I had the good fortune of going to USC and University of Southern California in LA. And it was a great experience. I went there specifically for the teaching credentials because I knew at that point that I wanted to teach in higher education, which I do now. I have for many years. But the guitar scene was so wonderful there, both the classical guitar department and the studio jazz guitar department. It was just such an amazing, strong, diverse.
Who was teaching there? Who was when you were there? Who were you learning from?
Well, I had the good fortune of studying with Joe DiOrio right up until he got sick. So I consider myself very blessed to have had that experience. So working with Joe was great. At the time, the guitar faculty also included Pat Kelly, Frank Potenza, Richard Smith, and right after I left, Bruce Foreman started. But we had lots of guest artists. And Larry Kuntz would come over a lot, Sid Jacobs, and the caliber of students was very high. I'm sure you know New West Guitar Group. They were an undergraduate guitar ensemble at the time, and they were being coached by the Los Angeles Guitar Quartet. So Bill Cannengeiser and Scott Tennant would come and hang out, and they coached those guys, and lots of players who have gone on to do wonderful things all went there at the same time.
You know, it's really funny. I was talking to Cheryl Bailey just before you and I were talking. And for those of you who see this video and not that video, Cheryl is one of the two people at Berklee School of Music. And we were talking about Frank Vignola and you know what a generous guy he is, and what a great player he is, and I mean, you can't say enough good things about Frank. Joe DiOrio and Frank, to me, this is just to me, are at polar opposite ends of the teaching spectrum. Frank can teach anything. I mean, he can go from 0 to 1,000,000 if you want. But Frank will start out at 0. I mean, we've got a lesson with Frank on he says, this is an E string. I mean, literally he's got a lesson that in this right here, this is an F note, and he's spoon feeding it to a 4-year-old, and then he can go as far as you want to go. Joe DiOrio, on the other hand, I have a couple of and obviously you worked. He starts in the stratosphere and keeps going higher. I mean, his mind. And first, we're gonna learn. Everybody should know Autumn Leaves or Stella. And he says first the melody, and he plays this thing, and I'm going, huh? What? I'm just not that sophisticated.
Yeah, I love them both, and it was wonderful, experiencing both playing together and seeing them teach. And yeah, I admire Frank so much for his ability to do that, as you just mentioned. I mean, I know his catalog on TrueFire peripherally, because I also have a dozen courses on TrueFire, so we're all part of the TrueFire stable, if you will. And I so admire Frank's ability to just start with the basics. But even if somebody is an absolute beginner and they're literally learning the notes, like you just said, and a chord for the first time, like here's your drop 2, here's your drop 3, he gets you playing. He gets you playing right out of the gate, so people don't get bogged down with theory. Don't lose that initial joy of wanting to play. So he's really an expert of getting like, okay, here's the chord you need to play. Here's how you play the melody. Now let's play.
Right.
And it was that in the camp because, all kinds of varying levels of guitar campers, from, pretty much beginners to people who are quite good, on the pro level, basically. And how he can handle all levels is really impressive.
It's amazing. And you know, when I listen to Joe play, you know, like with YouTubes or music, record music, I have to strap my helmet on.
Yeah.
You know, get the jock strap on, strap my helmet on, because I know my brain is going to be in for a ride.
Well, one
Right.
of the great hangs in LA, of course, was the John Pisano guitar night.
Right.
And it was such a thrill to go over there and just be a part of the scene. I mean, everybody was welcome. It was such a great hang, but watching Joe play, and for me, the highlights of seeing Joe play would be in a duo format with a bass player or another guitar player, or
Yeah.
just trio format with bass and drums. And hearing Joe Diorio play on a tune like Body and Soul was, yeah, stratospheric, just so inspiring and deep. And while I was at USC, Pat Metheny actually came and did a 3-day residency. And one of the highlights of the concerts that we all did was Pat and Joe played a duo concert. All of those things were so special.
I can only imagine. That would be something I would love to have seen.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing.
I would have loved. I can't even. Wow, that's like putting chocolate and peanut butter together for the first time.
Yeah, and they were, sometimes you never know when you put two people together that are such forces that have such strong musical identities. But
Right.
I think Pat has such respect, deep respect. I mean, Pat and Joe, they go back together forever, and so I think Pat had such love and admiration and respect for Joe that they complemented each other so well, and it was one of those situations that was really beautiful musically. It wasn't, like egos clashing or anything like
Right.
that. It was a wonderful musical experience.
That's very, very cool. So, what are you up to these days, man? What are you doing?
Yeah, staying busy, doing a lot of things. So currently, so I've been a professor of performance, music performance at University of Colorado, Denver for 16 years now. And currently I'm the chair. So I've kind of, as of last year, I've
I'm
moved to the
like the boss. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. And I guess I started being the chair last year. There were circumstances that I never had the intention of doing that, and I was just thinking about Cheryl because she's in that role at Berkeley, and there are a few others that have done that, but those people continue to serve as role models for me in
Right.
terms of being able to handle all these different things. But we're a very large music program. We have about 600 students and about 55 faculty. So we're the largest music program in the Rocky Mountain Central Southwestern region.
Yeah,
It's a lot.
that's a big program.
Yeah, it's a lot to manage. So that keeps me pretty busy. But in addition to that, I play regularly in various groups. Getting ready to go down to Florida in a couple of weeks to do 2 new True Fire courses. I've got a bunch of gigs coming up. I travel when I can. So yeah, I try to juggle a lot of different things.
You know, it's funny. I was talking to Cheryl, and I asked her kind of that same question along the same lines. It just so happens that I have you guys back to back today. And I was saying, you know, of the 3 things that you do, I know you do more than 3. You're a father, you're, a husband, and the whole 9 yards. I met your beautiful, beautiful daughter. Wasn't that your daughter that I met?
You're maybe thinking of Peter's daughter, but
I met Peter's daughter. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But my wife Andrea was around, and of course, as you know, she was the artist for the festival, so she was
Right.
there.
Anyway, so but you're a player, you're an educator, and you're an administrator. That's a lot of stuff to do. And I said to Cheryl, I said, how does that either inform your playing, hinder your playing, help your playing? I mean, how does that do? She says, well, I get up early in the morning. I practice 2 hours every morning religiously. And that's my time. That's why I practice 2 hours every day. In addition to that same kind of thing. So I'm going to ask you the same question. How do you juggle being a performer? Because you're a great player, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, in depth. You're a great player, but you're obviously an educator. You're teaching, and I know a lot of guys that teach, and as soon as they start teaching, a lot of teaching, their playing goes all to hell in a handbasket. And then you're also got this incredible administration thing with 600 students, 55 faculty. That's a lot of egos and personalities and stuff like that to juggle. So how do you keep the player, the artist in you alive? What's going on there? How are you doing that?
Yeah, that's I'm still trying to figure that out, to be honest with you. I think to your point with Cheryl's example, that's really important to carve out time every day for yourself just to do something, whether it's just technique maintenance, maybe write something, write some things, and just to kind of stay on top of your playing, because that can be quite challenging. For me, I try to do a lot of things to stay inspired. I listen to a lot of music. I'll actually make time to listen to it actively and not just passively. And try to get out in nature. I live in Colorado, so it's very easy to go outside and all of a sudden in the beautiful mountains. And it's important to step away from the guitar as well. If you don't feel like playing, then don't play. It's fine. You can come back to it later. And I think it's just I've learned how to, over the years, I've learned how to get a lot done in a short amount of practice time. So, and I'm actually working on a book with that in mind. This book is I'm going to start writing it later this year, but I've already kind of gotten the green light from the publisher. And so this will be my 5th book with them. And the tentative title is The Holistic Guitarist, and it's going to include a lot of different things, including injury prevention, physical injury prevention, mental strategies, and part of that is staying inspired and practicing. So I have a lot of ideas and thoughts and opinions about how to practice, and then I'm also going to be really taking advantage of my network of players, great players who are really good friends, and ask them their thoughts. So that same question that you asked me will have a lot of different
Right.
to that.
Very, very cool.
Staying on top of it.
I love that idea. The holistic, that I love that idea because no one ever talks about that.
That's exactly right. No one ever talks about that stuff. And you really just want to sit down and say, well, how do you think about this? And how do you approach practicing? And how do you stay fresh and inspired? And I think that there's a lot of commonality there, but there are a lot of different ideas that would spark inspiration. And so I think that's what it's all about. So for me, when you asked about the admin gig, I really enjoy solving problems. That's a part of my personality. And there's no end to problem solving when you're the chair of a department. And so that's kind of cool in a way, and it's a different thing than playing music. And in terms of just staying on top of the music, usually, like most professional players, you're practicing music for the gig that's coming up. So whatever it is, that's like a week out or a month out or even 2 months out, you're preparing for. So I have a solo guitar concert in a couple of weeks in Nashville. I'm getting my repertoire for that. I'm doing a Wes Montgomery tribute next week. I'm working on a bunch of Wes tunes. I have a gig this Sunday with a singer. I'm working on that batch of tunes, plus working on True Fire stuff. And it's a lot. It's a lot to manage. So I meditate. I drink a lot of coffee. I don't sleep a whole lot, but I try to be joyful about the whole thing and just remain inspired and thinking that, wow, I'm really lucky that I get to do this. I don't complain about it.
Wait a minute. I meditate.
Speaking of coffee,
I drink a lot of coffee.
Mm-hmm.
Oh God, I love that. A lot of coffee.
I think they go hand in hand with
I listen. Coffee is a good thing.
Coffee.
I can't get my arm around but that was what I meditate. I drink a lot of coffee. And what was the last thing you said?
I don't sleep much, but
I don't sleep much.
Yeah, those are the physical. But I think most importantly is the attitude of gratitude. I really believe in that, and I'm asking for all of these things. I chose them, and I try to approach each of them with joy and gratitude, and that helps a lot right there.
Oh, absolutely. Listen, your outlook is everything. So it's interesting that you said solve problems because over the years I've sat in a lot of chairs, not that chair that you're in, but I've sat in a lot of chairs and done a lot of things. And I've broken my philosophy on success of whatever it is you're after into two different. There's two rules, if you will. One is solve problems, learn to solve problems. I don't care if you're a doctor or if you're a lawyer, or if you're a work in a factory, or if you're on the whatever it is, solve the problem, learn how to do it. And the other one is try not to be an asshole. In other words, get along with people.
I would.
And so when you said solve problems, I said, boy, that's my mantra. It's like, learn to solve problems. I meditate, I drink a lot of coffee, I don't sleep much, man. I'm never going to forget that. That's incredible. And the other thing is, you say you get out in nature, which is really, that's an important thing. I want to touch on that just a minute. So you get out, you hike. What is your thing out in nature?
Yeah,
What do
I'm
you
not
do?
a big hiker like, ice cliffs and 14ers and all of that kind of, there's a lot of that out here in Colorado. But just, I think being outside and going on little hikes and walks and just being surrounded is just a great way to gain perspective. So if you're feeling like you're not inspired or you're burned out or you're just drowning, it's just really important to get away from that for a minute and to have a life. And I think, when I think of my favorite artists and my favorite guitar players, they all had a life. They didn't sit and practice 20 hours a day or anything like. They had
Right.
lives. All of those experiences and feelings and emotions go into the music. You
Well,
channel that.
it's funny you say that about hiking and about being out in Colorado. So I live in Atlanta, Georgia. So people go for a 3 to 5 mile hike here, but in Colorado, that's a walk to the mailbox.
Yeah. Yeah,
You
you
know?
put the altitude in there. But I like to get out on my bike a lot too. Nothing crazy, not a lot of mountain biking because that can be really damaging potentially for your hands. But just getting away from the music. I find that if I'm having an issue, whether I just can't finish writing an idea or I'm having a
Right.
technical thing, just get away from it and then come back to it later. And your idea of problem solving, that's a big part of being a musician, right? You're always, I mean, I think if you're attentive, right, you're
Mhm.
always working on your sound, your technique, the way that you touch the guitar, the way that you play a melody. I mean, you're always solving a problem when you
Let's
think of
talk about that a little bit because let's get into the guitar specifically. So when I saw you out in Colorado at the Archtop Festival, Rocky Mountain Archtop Festival, September 9th to the 11th of 2023. You're welcome, Peter. Um,
it.
so you were probably, I think, the only guy that I saw that was playing with a pedal board. You actually had some pedals on the floor, and I asked you about that because we have a little I have a little informal series here that I interview people about their philosophy of pedals.
I've
Because
seen a couple of those. Yeah,
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 so I mean, a couple of guys, pedals. What the hell is that? I mean, which I get that pedals. It's like putting a turd in a punch bowl. Excuse my expression, but I mean, there's no pedals. There's no crying in baseball. There's no pedals in jazz. And then you get a guy like Osnoy or Scott Henderson or I mean, you just Mike Stern. I mean, you just name it. They're huge pedal boards, and they're into it. Those guys are jazz players.
yeah.
There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But you, one of the monikers that gets kicked around with you a lot is fingerstyle player, which I think you're a lot more than that. I think you definitely are a fingerstyle player, and you got it down, and you're a fantastic player on that. But I've also seen you play stuff that's more like more single note line kind of stuff that's more traditional bebop language and stuff like that. So everything's not like when you hear fingerstyle, most people think chord melody.
Yeah.
That's what they're thinking, and you're that for sure, but you got a whole lot more going on. So I looked down and you're playing through one of Evan Grace's boxes, and specifically, and I think did you have a reverb pedal too? Was that the other one?
Yeah, a reverb and a tuner, and that's pretty much it. So
Yeah.
I fall kind of in the middle ground, and I think it's all good. I love all approaches because it's all about sound. And
Mhm.
I love players that go straight into the amp, and I love players that use a lot of pedals and sounds to kind of sculpt their musical vision. And for me, I don't use a lot of pedals. I do have, so as you mentioned, I always have a tuner on there, which the tuner is equally important to serve as a mute, if you need it to
Sure.
just fill the signal. But pretty much all I use is a reverb and then occasionally a preamp. And I really love these Grace Design preamps. I use the Alex. And what it does is it just gives you a little bit more EQ flexibility on the front end. Of course, I always use Hendrickson amps, like either a Bud or a Blue or both in stereo. And
Mhm.
reverbs, gosh, over the years, I've had a bunch of those because for me, if like that's the one effect that I'm going to use, it really has to be pristine. And so I just got this incredible universal audio pedal. It's called the Golden Reverb, and there are so many parameters of springs and plates and halls
Yeah,
that
those
are,
guys know what they're doing.
they do. It's the
Yeah.
same as the plugin. So
Yeah.
yeah, I spend a lot of time really trying to focus on my reverb, just to get the sound right.
Well, people don't understand reverb. They think spring reverb, but and what you're trying to do is you're trying to make sure that what I try to do with reverb is trying to recreate a space that is the optimum space, no matter what physically I'm in. So if you're in a concert hall, you don't need a whole lot of reverb, because guess what? Reverb is part of the design. That's why those walls are shaped the way they're shaped. That's why things are, because it's designed to have a certain, what they call direct to reflected ratio, which is getting a little bit technical, a little bit, but and so you find a space, like, let's just say that but what's your favorite space to play in? I mean, like, without any reverb, if you were to, where is there a hall that you like, or a room that you like, that you just go, wow, I don't need reverb here, I don't need anything. This is it.
Yeah, I mean, I just played a guitar concert yesterday in a beautiful performance space, and it didn't need anything. And it was about a 500 seat theater, and it's a chamber room. So obviously, with that, for solo guitar, I love those rooms. As soon as you're playing in a group with a drummer, right, or like an organ trio, it's a completely different thing. I think then you want to be in a room that's more like the Vanguard or something, like real small and dense and
Right.
tight, and
And that's what that allows you to do. So if you were to play in that small room, the Vanguard, but you're playing solo, but you want people to experience it as if they're in that 500 seat room, you dial that in with a
Yeah,
reverb.
anything to enhance the music. I think it's something that you would never notice the reverb, but you would notice it if you turned it off.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and one thing I wanted to mention, I don't think this is necessarily controversial, but it's something that not a lot of people think about, but you'll appreciate this with your audio engineering background. When we all listen to our favorite players, guitar players, for example, and you listen to those favorite recordings, to me, the sound of the recording is almost as important as the sound of the guitarist. So, for example, there are those recordings of Wes Montgomery, say, that are just, Wes is like, he's like the top for me, the king, and but there's some recordings of Wes that just sound terrible, like the amp is distorting and it's not mic'd very well and the tone is real thin. And that's of course not Wes's fault. A lot of the sound of a record was the engineer, or the particular, but mostly the engineer with the ears, but the production value, the microphones they use, the configuration of mics. And so I think that's something that's often overlooked. I mean, of course, Wes developed his own sound from his heart and his vision, and he had it, but the next step is whether that's being captured, on a record like So Much Guitar. The sound is so warm, or obviously of one of those Verve recordings, it's like beautiful, perfect sound. But then there's some other recordings where it's not so much, and Wes has nothing to do with that. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah, it's the state of the art of recording and people's understanding of what they really want to hear is progressed, like, it's through the stratosphere from where it was. The idea that of capture back then was all over the place. It was the wild, wild west. Some guys knew what they wanted to hear. They knew that they were trying to, and then some people just said, yeah, put a microphone there. Yeah,
Right.
we'll get it. And so now now that we've developed, if you will, and the engineers of today and the design engineers of today are able to go back and look at what the great stuff was and say, okay, well, how did they do that? So let's build products where we can, we've got that, we can replicate that, all that. So the whole state of the art of recording and the understanding of that the room is important, that the instrument interacts with the room. It's just like a guitar and a pedal and an amplifier. I mean, they interact, and it changes. Like your your Evan Grace preamp, it changes. If I pick up a guitar and I hit a note, maybe actually I'll hit a note here. If I put that's just obviously the guitar, but if I put that into an amp, it may or may not change the dynamic response of that note. It may make it much more sensitive. So it synthetically, it will move this note. It's a lot different to hear this note from 6 inches away, from a foot away to 2 feet away, where the direct reflected ratio changes. But some of this stuff, the electronics is so good, it's like sticking that in your ear. And when you do that, it becomes not musical anymore. It becomes very sterile, and that's not. But the whole thing about getting the sound to sound like the instrument had intended and what the artist has. Does this recording sound like what the artist has in his mind? And when I'm recording it, is this what the artist, you know, is this me playing, or am I hearing myself synthetically? Like, have you ever been in a studio, you put on the headphones, doesn't sound like anything like what you know you sound like?
Worst. That's the worst feeling, because it doesn't represent who you are. And, you know, I've always envied tenor sax players, for example. Like, their sound is all right there, and it's acoustic, you know, so you mic it properly and it's all right there. But yeah, then the amp is a whole different story. I mean, you get your sound acoustically and all of that, and then you plug it into an amp, and it's a completely different thing. And that's why you know, meeting Peter Henriksen was so great years ago now, but all of the years leading up to that, it was just like, oh, you know, for what I wanted to do in a solo guitar context, which was to have, you know, the sound of voices singing together, or a piano, that kind of note separation, clarity. I could never get that out of a twin reverb, right? Or like a tube amp. I mean, you can get a certain thing out of that, but I always went a different path, kind of following nylon string players and great classical players, or somebody like Earl Klugh or Tuck Andrus, who also kind of went the other way in having like a direct sound, like having all of the electronics on board the guitar and then going right into a PA, which is always going to sound better than an amp for certain things. You know what I mean?
If you're playing single note lines a la Eric Johnson, you know, the amplifier, and I know that Eric is one of your buddies because I got the photograph, but you know, the amplifier, the interaction of the amp and everything like that, the amp is the instrument as well as the guitar.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's a whole different, you know, different ball of wax. But it does get, you know, someday we'll talk about this a little bit more in depth, because it gets pretty convoluted, and most people have no clue what we're talking about. You know, they just go, oh, that's unsane, you know, all that kind of thing. And so it's very, very complex. What I like to get out of my guitars, and I'll be honest with you, most of the time I'm playing a Strat, or I'm playing a 335 kind of, I play an I-35 Collings a lot. And I want the amp and the guitar to sound pretty similar and respond, if you will, to my finger touch, pretty similar to what's happening acoustically if I don't plug it into anything. You know, I get X amount of sustain. I get this. This is where it's going to die. I don't want it to be less than or more than. I want it when you know, that's kind of what I'm looking for. And that's really, really hard to achieve. And getting back to Peter's amplifiers, Peter has done a better job than anybody that I know, or his dad, and you know, all that, of making the guitar come through the amplifier, you know, like it sounds acoustically.
Yeah, I agree.
Just bigger. Anyway, so something, there was something else I was going to ask. So in your own playing, what are you working on yourself now?
Well, I'm always working on my sound. I'm always working on my touch, you know, clarity of ideas, and I try to match what my hands and the guitar will be able to do. I try to match that what I'm hearing in my head, as well as match things that are unachievable, in the sense of, like, I think of Yo-Yo Ma, you know, just a beautiful blooming note from a cello. Well, I'm never going to be able to get that, but if I have kind of that idea of like the clarity, the richness of tone, being able to play on the string cleanly and clearly, that's really hard. I mean, I think a lot of people, you know, initially you think of technique as just, you know, being able to get around the fretboard and maybe some specific things like sweep picking, or, you know, hammer-ons, or, you know, alternate picking or whatever. But I think you move past that in the long run, and then your technique is everything that contributes to your overall sound. And I'm really constantly going back to the drawing board of like, okay, there's so many different ways to pluck a string and to touch the guitar with your fretting hand and with your picking hand, that I just am really like kind of getting a super super microscopic look at what the sound is. And I try to record myself a lot, and I hear mistakes all the time, things that most guitar players don't even think about, like whether it's just the sound of the string, you know, you're sliding up and down, that all of that kind of extraneous noise. I try to clean that up in my technique. So that's kind of what I'm working on, you know, technically. It's all part of the same sound. And then other things that I like to work on, I like to write a lot, you know, of course. I'm working on some new solo arrangements. I'd like to record another solo album next year, so I'm just getting some skeletons of arrangements together. Thank you.
Bob Bakert for Jazz Guitar Today with Sean McGowan. Thank you, Sean. See you,
Thanks,
buddy.
everybody. Cheers.
Bye bye now.